The envelope arrived on a Tuesday, not in the mail, not slipped under a door. It was hand-delivered by two men in dark suits who didn't bother to introduce themselves. They simply walked into the sprawling Castellano estate in the Hamptons, found Elena Morales scrubbing marble floors in the East Wing, and dropped a sealed medical laboratory packet onto the bucket of soapy water beside her knees. "You have 48 hours, the taller one said. His voice was flat, bureaucratic. Cheek swab. Return it to the address on the envelope. Non negotiable. Elena looked up from the floor, her dark curls falling across her flushed face. She was a full-figured woman in her late 20s, soft around the hips and chest, with strong arms built from years of physical labor. She wore the standard housekeeper uniform, black slacks, white button-down, sensible shoes. Her name tag read simply, Elena. "What is this?" she asked, her voice steady despite the cold dread pooling in her stomach. The second man, shorter but broader, didn't even look at her. "DNA test. Orders from the Castellano family legal counsel. You're required to comply." Then they turned and walked out, their footsteps echoing down the hallway like a death march. Elena sat back on her heels, staring at the envelope. Her hands were still wet, pruned from scrubbing grout for the last 3 hours. The estate was preparing for the annual Castellano Gala, a glittering event where the most powerful crime families on the East Coast gathered under the pretense of charity and old money. Elena had worked here for 2 years. She cleaned their rooms, pressed their clothes, served their meals. She was invisible, or so she thought. She didn't know why they wanted her DNA. She didn't know what they were looking for, but she knew one thing with absolute certainty. In the world of the Castellano syndicate, you didn't ask questions. You obeyed or you disappeared. Elena pulled the envelope from the bucket, water dripping onto the pristine floor she just cleaned. Inside was a sterile swab kit, a consent form written in dense legal language, and a prepaid return label addressed to a private genetics lab in Manhattan. Her throat tightened. She thought about running. She thought about calling her younger sister in Queens and telling her to pack a bag. But running from the Castellanos wasn't like quitting a normal job. It was signing your own death warrant. So she did what she always did. She swallowed her fear, folded the envelope, and tucked it into the pocket of her apron. What Elena didn't know, what no one had bothered to tell her, was that across the estate, in the heavily guarded office on the 3rd floor, Dante Castellano was sitting behind a mahogany desk, reading the same instructions his legal team had drafted. And he was absolutely furious. Dante Castellano was not a man prone to visible anger. At 36, he had inherited his father's empire and expanded it with ruthless precision. He controlled shipping routes, real estate portfolios, and underground gambling operations that stretched from Boston to Miami. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and moved through rooms with the quiet authority of someone who had never needed to raise his voice to be obeyed. But right now, his jaw was tight enough to crack teeth. "Explain this to me again," Dante said, his voice dangerously calm. He didn't look up from the document in front of him. Slowly, across the desk sat his uncle, Vincent Castellano, the family's consigliere. Vincent was in his 60s, silver-haired, sharp-eyed, and utterly unintimidated by his nephew's anger. The simple Vincent said, leaning back in the leather chair, "Your father's will contained a clause. A very specific clause that was sealed until his death. It states that if any biological heir outside of wedlock can be proven to exist, they are entitled to a percentage of the estate." Dante's eyes flicked up, cold and dark. "And you think the housekeeper is my half-sister?" "We think it's possible," Vincent replied evenly. "Your father had appetites. We've identified 3 women who worked in this house over the years who fit the timeline. Elena Morales is one of them. Her mother, Sofia Morales, was employed here 28 years ago. She left abruptly. No forwarding address. No severance collected." Dante set the document down with deliberate care. "So you're running DNA tests on my staff based on speculation." "We're protecting the family," Vincent corrected. "If there's a legitimate claim to your father's assets, we need to know before someone else finds out and uses it against us. The Irish syndicate would love to destabilize this family from the inside. A secret heir is leverage. Dante, we eliminate the uncertainty now, or we deal with a war later." Dante stared at his uncle for a long, cold moment. Then he stood, buttoning his suit jacket with sharp, controlled movements. "Run your test," Dante said quietly. "But if you humiliate my staff without cause, if you turn this house into a circus, I will personally ensure you regret it." Vincent smiled thinly. "Understood." Dante walked out of the office, his footsteps measured and deliberate. But inside, his mind was racing. He knew Elena Morales. Not well, not personally, but he'd noticed her. It was impossible not to. She was the kind of woman who moved through the estate like a shadow. Efficient, quiet, unobtrusive. But there were moments when he'd caught her looking at something. A painting, a view of the ocean through the windows, and her face would shift. Just for a second. She'd look like someone who didn't belong in a uniform. She'd look like someone who belonged in the world she was cleaning. And now his family was treating her like a threat. Dante didn't like it. Elena performed the test that night in the small, sparse bedroom she'd been assigned in the staff quarters. The room was barely large enough for a single bed, a narrow dresser, and a lamp. She sat on the edge of the mattress, the kit spread out on the thin blanket. Her hands shook as she opened the sterile packaging. She didn't understand why this was happening. Her mother had never talked about the Castellanos. Sofia Morales had died when Elena was 16, leaving behind nothing but medical debt and a daughter who'd had to drop out of high school to work full-time. Elena had clawed her way into this job through sheer determination, lying about her age, forging references, doing whatever it took to survive. She swabbed the inside of her cheek, sealed the sample in the vial, and placed it back in the envelope. Then she sat there, staring at it. What if it's true? The thought had been whispering in the back of her mind since the men left. What if her mother had been more than just a housekeeper? What if the reason Sofia had run, the reason she'd never spoken about this place, was because something had happened here that she couldn't escape? Elena shook her head, shoving the thought away. It didn't matter. Even if it was true, even if her DNA linked her to the Castellano bloodline, she had no illusions about what that would mean. She wouldn't be welcomed. She'd be erased. She grabbed her jacket, slipped the envelope into her bag, and left the estate under cover of darkness. The nearest mailbox was half a mile down the road. She walked quickly, her breath misting in the cold October air. She didn't see the black sedan parked across the street. She didn't see Dante Castellano sitting in the back seat, watching her. The results came back 6 days later. Vincent called an emergency meeting in the third-floor office. Dante arrived to find his uncle, the family lawyer, and two of his most trusted captains already seated around the conference table. "Well?" Dante asked, his voice clipped. Vincent slid a folder across the table. Dante opened it. The DNA report was clinical, sterile, and devastatingly clear. Probability of half-sibling relationship, 99.97. Dante's breath left his lungs in a slow, controlled exhale. Elena Morales was his half-sister. "Jesus Christ," muttered one of the captains. Vincent leaned forward, his expression grim. "Your father had an affair with her mother 28 years ago. Sofia Morales became pregnant. She was paid off and dismissed. But there's no record of a settlement agreement. Nonda. No legal release. That means she has a claim," the lawyer finished. "Under your father's will, Elena Morales is entitled to 12% of the estate's liquid assets. That's approximately $43 million. The room fell silent. Dante closed the folder. His face was unreadable. "Where is she now?" he asked quietly. "Still in the staff quarters," Vincent said. "She doesn't know yet. We wanted to brief you first." "Good." Dante stood. "I'll handle this." Vincent began. "I said I'll handle it." The tone left no room for argument. Elena was folding linens in the estate's industrial laundry room when the door opened. She looked up, expecting another housekeeper. Instead, she saw Dante Castellano. He stood in the doorway, tall and imposing in a dark suit, his hands in his pockets. His expression was calm, but there was something in his eyes, something intense and unreadable, that made her heart stutter. "Mr. Castellano," she stammered, immediately straightening. Can I help you with something?" "Sit down, Elena," Dante said quietly. It wasn't a request. She lowered herself onto the edge of the folding table, her pulse hammering in her throat. Dante stepped inside and closed the door behind him. The click of the latch was unnervingly final. "You took the DNA test," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," she whispered. I didn't have a choice. I know." He pulled a folded piece of paper from his jacket and set it on the table beside her. Elena stared at it, her hands trembling. "What is that?" she asked. "The results." Her stomach dropped. "I don't understand," she said, her voice breaking. Why would your family?" "Because my father had an affair with your mother," Dante said bluntly. "And you're his daughter." The words hit her like a physical blow. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. No, she whispered. That's not possible. My mother never. She worked here 28 years ago. Dante continued, his voice steady but not unkind. She left suddenly.
No explanation.
No contact. You were born 9 months later. Elena's vision blurred. She pressed her hands against the table to keep from collapsing. I'm your half-sister, she whispered. Yes. The room spun. Dante watched her carefully. He didn't move, didn't reach for her. He simply waited. What happens now? Elena finally asked, her voice barely audible. Dante's jaw tightened. That depends on you. Over the next 72 hours, Elena's world turned inside out. Dante didn't tell the rest of the family immediately. Instead, he moved her out of the staff quarters and into a private guest suite on the second floor. He assigned her a security detail. He had the family lawyer draft a confidential briefing outlining her legal rights. And then he sat down with her in the quiet library overlooking the ocean and told her the truth. You're entitled to $43 million, Dante said. Under my father's will, you have a legitimate claim to a portion of the estate. But if you pursue that claim publicly, it will destroy you. Elena stared at him, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea she hadn't touched. What do you mean? The families we do business with don't tolerate uncertainty, Dante explained. If word gets out that there's a disputed heir, they'll see it as weakness. They'll move against us, and you'll be caught in the crossfire. So you're saying I should just disappear? Elena asked bitterly. Pretend I don't exist? No, Dante said, his voice firm. I'm saying you have a choice. You can take the money and leave. I'll ensure you're protected. Set up somewhere far from here. Or, he paused. Or, she prompted. Dante leaned forward, his dark eyes locking onto hers. Where you stay, you take your place in this family. Not as a housekeeper, as my sister, as a Castellano. Elena's breath caught. You're serious. Completely. Why? She whispered. Why would you do that? Dante's expression softened. Just barely. Because you deserve better than being erased, he said quietly. And because I've spent the last 6 days watching you hold yourself together while the world falls apart around you. You're stronger than half the men in my organization. If you're my sister, then you're family. And I protect family. Elena chose to stay. The announcement was made at the annual Castellano Gala 3 weeks later. The ballroom was filled with the most powerful crime families on the East Coast. Men in tailored tuxedos, women dripping in diamonds, the air thick with wealth, danger, and unspoken alliances. Dante stood at the front of the room, his hand resting lightly on Elena's back. She wore a midnight blue gown that had been custom-made for her, the fabric flowing over her curves like water. Her dark hair was pinned up, her makeup flawless. She looked nothing like the invisible housekeeper who'd scrubbed floors. She looked like a Castellano. Ladies and gentlemen, Dante said, his voice carrying effortlessly across the room. I'd like to introduce my sister,
Elena Castellano.
The room went silent. Then the whispers started. Elena felt the weight of 100 eyes on her, judging, calculating, measuring her worth. But she didn't shrink. She didn't apologize. She stood tall, her chin raised, and met their stares with quiet defiance. Dante leaned down, his voice low enough that only she could hear. Welcome to the family, he murmured. The Irish syndicate made their move 3 days later. It started with a fire at one of Dante's shipping warehouses in Brooklyn. Then a shootout outside a restaurant owned by a Castellano affiliate. Then threatening letters delivered to Elena's new penthouse apartment in Manhattan. The message was clear. The revelation of a secret Castellano heir had destabilized the power structure, and Elena was the weak point they intended to exploit. Dante called an emergency council meeting. His captains, his uncle, his enforcers, all gathered in the fortified conference room beneath the estate. They're testing us, Vincent said, pacing in front of the windows. They want to see if we'll protect her or cut her loose. We protect her, Dante said flatly. She's family. She's a liability, one of the captains argued. No offense to Miss Morales, but she's been a Castellano for 3 weeks. The Irish have been waiting for an opening like this for years. Dante's hand slammed down on the table. The sound echoed like a gunshot. She is family. His voice was quiet, lethal. Anyone who disagrees can leave now. No one moved. Elena stood in the doorway listening. She hadn't been invited to the meeting, but she'd come anyway. She stepped into the room. Every head turned. If I'm the problem, Elena said, her voice steady, then let me be part of the solution. Dante's eyes narrowed.
Elena.
You said I was strong enough to be a Castellano, she interrupted. So let me prove it. Use me as bait. Draw them out. End this. The room erupted in protest. But Dante didn't say a word. He simply stared at her, his expression unreadable. Finally, he spoke. No, Dante. I said no. He stood, crossing the room to stand in front of her. You want to prove yourself? Fine. But you don't do it by throwing yourself into the line of fire. You do it by learning this business, by earning their respect, by becoming someone they can't dismiss. Elena met his gaze, her jaw set. Then teach me. Over the next 6 months, Elena Castellano became a force to be reckoned with. Dante personally oversaw her education. She learned the shipping routes, the offshore accounts, the delicate web of alliances that kept the Castellano empire intact. She sat in on negotiations. She memorized names, territories, debts. And she was brilliant. Where others saw a curvy former housekeeper playing dress-up, Dante saw something far more dangerous. A woman with nothing to lose and everything to prove. When the Irish syndicate finally made their move, a coordinated attack on 3 Castellano properties simultaneously, Elena was ready. She'd predicted the targets. She'd repositioned security. She'd quietly reached out to a rival faction within the Irish organization, offering them a better deal than their current leadership. By the time the dust settled, the Irish offensive had collapsed from the inside, and Elena Castellano had orchestrated the entire thing. 1 year after the DNA test that had changed everything, Elena stood on the balcony of the Castellano estate, looking out over the Atlantic. Dante joined her, 2 glasses of whiskey in hand. He handed her one. You've come a long way from scrubbing floors, he said.
Elena smiled faintly.
So have you from wanting to erase me? Dante didn't deny it. I was wrong. You were scared, Elena corrected, of what I represented, of losing control. And now? Elena took a sip of whiskey, the burn grounding her. Now I'm not going anywhere, she said quietly. This is my family, my empire, and I'll burn anyone who tries to take it from me. Dante raised his glass. To the truth that destroyed the empire, he said. Elena clinked her glass against his. And to the sister who rebuilt it. Elena Morales went from invisible housekeeper to Mafia royalty in 1 DNA test. But the real question is, did exposing the truth make the Castellano empire stronger? Or did it plant the seeds of its destruction? Drop a comment. Do you think Dante made the right choice bringing her into the family? Or did he just sign her death warrant?